Okay, good morning. My name is Dustin Lima, and this will be my presentation on the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923. So, some basic information to give us a general idea of what took place. The earthquake took place on September 1st, 1923, in Japan, and it took place around noon. And this is kind of an important detail to remember, so we're going to come back to this later. Just keep that in mind. And it was a magnitude of 7.9, which, as we know, was a little on the big side of things. So it basically affected this entire Kanto region, which is primarily made up of the Kanto Plain, which is what we're going to go into later, which is all on this main island of Honshu, which is basically the big segment of Japan. It was caused by a convergent boundary, which is basically when the subducting plate, the oceanic crust, slips beneath the continental crust, and this was between the Philippine Sea Plate and the Okhotsk Plate. And from this collision between the two plates, there was the initial earthquake followed by 50 aftershocks. The estimated death toll of this catastrophe was 142,800 individuals, and this is including those that were never found or were presumed dead. And just a general overview again of the place where it took place. The Kanto region and the Kanto Plain, which is the largest plain of Japan, spanning over 17,000 square kilometers. And as you can see, it is a big habited area. It includes the greater Tokyo area and 7 prefectures. So there's a lot of people building here, living here. It's a gigantic metropolitan area, even back then in the 1920s. And while I'm not sure how many people live there now, it is currently home to 1/3 of Japan's population. And as I just stated, even back then, it was a very big place because Japan was basically at the height of the Industrial Revolution. So it was this big place where East and West basically came together, which is also something that we'll touch upon later. And as I previously stated, the earthquake took place at just before 12 noon. So why do you think this was such a big detail? Why would it matter that this earthquake was taking place in the middle of the day? And the answer, quite simply, is that it was lunchtime. And what happened really was it wasn't the earthquake that killed a lot of people. This wasn't like Haiti where the buildings basically crumbled and crushed a lot of people. Instead, what the main cause of casualties from this Great Kanto earthquake was really fire. Because back then, cooking fires were still a common practice. We didn't have electric or gas stoves as we do now, and a lot of people still cooked on open fires. And back then, a lot of Japanese buildings were made of wood, not concrete. So as you can imagine, all these cooking fires spilling over from their pits and basically alighting all of these wooden buildings. And all these buildings are close together because it's a city, so you have fire spreading throughout these cities because it's going from building to building to building, and there's all these people caught between them, within them, and in the streets they couldn't really get away because the roads were basically layered with this black tar called tarmac. And while it was solid, because of the heat of all these buildings burning, it basically became this thick molassesy substance that a lot of people got their feet trapped in and were basically stuck as the world around them burned. And as if that weren't bad enough, a wind came in and turned this fire into basically a spinning inferno of a fire tornado or a firestorm. And the authorities couldn't get out there and they couldn't put out these fires because the earthquake had damaged Tokyo's water distribution supplies. So in total, the act of putting out the fire really took 3 days, and that's a lot of damage that could be done in 3 days with this fire. And just a quote to give people the general idea of what was happening. The rumbling sound of apocalyptic fires added further terror to it. Screams and shrieks were everywhere. Fires turned into an inferno. It was hell. The big city of Tokyo, the largest in the Orient, at the zenith of its prosperity, burned down and melted away within 2 days and 3 nights. Takashima Beiho in 1923. And as if the fire wasn't enough, the earthquake basically came in tandem with a bunch of other natural disasters. So while you have fires basically burning down Tokyo, you have a typhoon hitting the harbor, ruining all the ships there, and all the people caught along that coastline. In the main area where you have the mountains and rocks and cliff sides, you have landslides, which is basically destroying a lot of these houses or completely just breaking off and sending them tumbling into the sea. One such incident happened with a train station and a train still full of its passengers where basically that entire cliffside broke off and it sent the station, the train, and all the people in it tumbling into the ocean. And speaking of the ocean, you have the typhoon hitting the bay, you have landslides tearing up the cliff sides, and on top of it all, you have a tsunami ravaging the coastline and menacing anyone that's living along that edge. And a few more quotes to basically give a general idea of all this carnage taking place. Over the ruined city on Monday, September 3rd, rose the never to be forgotten smell of burned human flesh. As everywhere charred bodies lay exposed to the sun, no one who walked through that city of the dead will ever forget those sights. Osaka Mainichi Shinbun, 1923. And another quote after the fire had been put out, and basically you have all these city dwellers misplaced. The entire city was burnt to ash. Tens of thousands of people scoured the ruins and searched the rubble for any food or water. Yamanashi Hanzo, 1923. Now, excuse me. Sorry about that. Carrying on. Now, as a lot of people likely know, Japan is a very, very spiritual and religious area, and there's a belief that there's a very close relationship between nature and humanity. And like China, there was this sort of belief of the mandate of heaven, where the right to rule was basically a God-given right from the heavens. And if the leader, in this case, the Emperor of Japan, wasn't doing his job right, the gods would punish him. And a lot of people basically believe that that is what this was, Shinbatsu, or divine punishment. And a quote is basically, "It is obvious that this calamity was punishment from the gods, Kami-sama, the result of their disappointment and anger at the sight of Tokyo. The gods have done a thorough cleanup for us. They said, 'Come now, it is time to clean up every nook and cranny.' And by the power of the heavens, it happened." Okutani Fumitomo, 1923. So there are a lot of people, more so the religious people, who believe that because of the Industrial Revolution, Japan was entering this stage where it was basically a hedonistic society where people were just throwing their money, indulging in all of their desires, and basically upsetting the gods by not giving the praise and worship that was properly due. And while we know that this isn't exactly the case here with the science that we have now, this is kind of something that spurred a lot of thoughts during this period. And just something to keep in mind as we move on to the aftermath is another quote. "The earthquake revealed not only the most virtuous quality that had been hidden inside our heart, but also the most evil side of us. For what reason did so many creatures of hell emerge among our people at that time? They damaged the pride of our empire considerably." Fukasaku Yasubuni, 1924. Now, this is referring to the mass violence and rioting that took place after the riots. Not after the riots, but after the earthquake. So you have all these people displaced, poor, they lost their homes, they're all hungry, looking for food, and really sometimes people just need something to blame. And their blame was directed towards the Koreans, who a lot of people were basically upstarting the belief that they were taking advantage of this and basically exploiting Japan while it was vulnerable. And in tandem with this hatred and racism became the nationalist uprising, which kind of set the stage for Japan's involvement in World War II in the coming years. And on top of this racism, there are the people who were dissatisfied with the current government and infrastructure of Japan, and they use this period when the people were most vulnerable to try and stir up trouble and attack the people in charge while they were still weak. Additionally, it incited more preparation for the future. Since the Kanto earthquake, Japan has put a considerable amount of efforts in keeping track of natural disasters to kind of try and prevent something of this scale from ever happening again. And since then, September 1st has been referred to as Disaster Prevention Day in Japan. Additionally, while I did say that it caused mass violence and rioting, this disaster kind of proved to be that one thing that Japan really needed to bring it together, because before the earthquake, there was a lot of political strife. No one really knew what to do with Japan in this period, or it was at its most dynamic stage in the Industrial Revolution. And with all of these people suffering, it kind of made Japan come together for readjustment and reconstruction. And it would appear I'm over time, so my apologies for taking so long. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Thank you.